As they say, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And a lot of times it's the failure that leads to the feedback that leads to the breakthrough. And
That's
you're
right.
kind of holding your breakthrough back because you want perfection out of the gate, and perfection's not possible, especially if you're designing something for other people, because
That's right.
you can't anticipate everything they possibly need and want and where they're going to get stuck. You just have to do it enough times to get to that point where it's like really dialed in.
Yes, love it. So word to the wise for all our coaches here: stop thinking about it, stop researching it, do what you can, take this minimum viable product that Marisa's sharing with us and get that feedback, because that's going to lead you to that first big breakthrough for sure. Well, I have got a good one for you today. I'm slightly fangirling over here because, as you all know, I started at Brave Thinking Institute as a school teacher, getting certified as a coach, having no idea what I was doing. And I had the privilege in one of our trainings to learn from our next guest about building an online course. But I want to tell you up front that her skill set here is way more than let's just throw up an online course that someone might never take, that they might do for 2 seconds and then never finish. That is not what you're going to hear today. So I'm super excited to introduce a person whose father told her that she had no marketable skills. And I'm pretty sure I heard that when she graduated from college, he was like, I just spent $150,000 on your education. What are you doing with it? And she went on from that to build a highly successful multi-million-dollar business. She has helped over 16,000 students to find their purpose in teaching online and building successful courses. And she's the founder of Live Your Message. Now, I want to share with you that at Brave Thinking Institute, we are an 8 going on 9-figure company. Who do we call when we're going to have an online course starting to make sure that it's the most brilliant thing we can create for our students? It's this beautiful lady. So I would like to introduce to you Marisa Murgatroyd. Welcome to the Abundant Coach podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, because I'm a fangirl of your company. So we get to fangirl together.
We'll be the mutual admiration society here. So I love it. Yay. So I want to start by asking, well, first of all, this is actually my first question. Is your dad still asking you why you didn't do something with a $150,000 college education?
Well, my dad is a little bit faint on praise, I'll say that, because I think this whole online world isn't something he really gets. You know, he comes from that background of you go work for a well-respected corporation, you get a paycheck, you stay there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you punch your card, and then you punch out and you retire, right? And
Yeah.
so this whole world of coaching and courses is like, what do you do again? Huh?
Yeah.
Huh?
Totally. You will very much appreciate this. When I used to have my own coaching company and I would have these weekend long seminars, workshops, my parents had no idea what I do. They even sat through the seminar and still had no idea what I did, but they always liked to come because I gave what they saw as a free buffet lunch. So I can appreciate the parents who are like, what do you guys do? So what I'd love to start with is, I know that you like to call online courses experience products. And that's probably something that a lot of the coaches that listen are not familiar with. So what is it that, I know what makes you special, but what is it that makes you special in the online world in terms of actually wanting students to have an experience rather than just let's make money by selling an online course?
100%. Well, first of all, a lot of people think courses are basically home study programs where you record yourself on camera and then you put it online and then you make passive income. People go through, they transform, you never touch them or their experience. And that's more a replica of kind of traditional education. And
Mhm.
the thing is, it doesn't work. So traditional online courses that are delivered like that, I call that the old way of creating an online course,
Mhm.
basically leave 97% of the people who buy them behind, in terms of people who just stall out. They never open the thing, or they open, they get demotivated, they lose interest, they walk away, they refund, they never come back. And that's really what most people know of as online courses in education. But experience products use these 10 core experiences of the experience formula, which I've got right here, and I'll lead you through some of them
Okay, perfect.
today, to basically create what I call unstoppable momentum, to really leverage the dopamine button, the reward center inside of our brains, to get people super engaged and super excited about not just learning, but taking actions to transform their lives. Because the other thing that a lot of people don't know, which kind of relates to this whole AI revolution that seems to be shaking people up,
Mhm.
is that information alone doesn't change people's lives. Because if you think about it, if information alone changed our lives, where we have access to all the information we could ever want or need for multiple lifetimes at our fingertips through Google and YouTube and ChatGPT, we would have everything that we want already. We would
Mhm.
have millions of dollars in the bank account. We would be svelte in our bodies and radiantly healthy. We would have ideal, perfect romantic relationships with our partners. Our families would adore every aspect of who we are. But that hasn't come to pass, and more information has actually created more anxiety and more mental illness.
Mhm.
And so, if you look at these promises now that you can create a course using AI by just pushing a button and delivering information, well, that's the new way of course creation. And it's pretty much the old way, but having AI do the work.
Yeah,
Neither the old way or the new way works. So, what I teach people is the right way to create an online course, which is to design programs that really kind of match the way we as humans like to learn, that work with our psychology, that work with our neurochemistry, that really use principles of brain science and gamification from Silicon Valley apps and things that get us kind of hooked on doing things that don't usually change our lives, but apply that stuff to the things that will change our lives, right? And what I've seen is that by applying these 10 core principles, you can get 10 to 30 times more student success in results than a traditional online course, because information isn't what gets people results. It's experiences that lead to transformation. And that's what this formula is all about. And I think the vast majority of people, especially coaches, the type of people who are attracted to the Brave Thinking Institute, really are going into this kind of field and this profession to change lives, starting
that's
with
right.
themselves, right?
Yeah, because nobody wants to, I mean, at least the coaches that we serve do not want to create a course that nobody takes.
Yeah.
Because most of our coaches, I would say, that come and get certified at Brave Thinking Institute, they have a calling to help. They're fulfilling that calling. For some of them have been helping professions like nurses, teachers, things like that. And so they've been helping their whole lives, but they're really being called to help in a much bigger way. And so
Mhm.
I know none of them want to put something out there that nobody's going to take. So when I think about, so as I mentioned in Marisa's intro, she has supported the Brave Thinking Institute. If you've ever taken our program, 8 Spiritual Secrets to Multiply Your Money, and loved the way that you get rewarded and can redeem and can do all the different things that you do within that program, that was part of Marisa's genius, coming and supporting us and saying, we want our students, clients to be successful. And so I'm curious, what are some of the things you mentioned there's 10 things. What are some of the things that are important that you have found really helps people stay engaged? Because like you said, I was listening to a YouTube video you did, and you said something like, everybody has this access to the same information, but that doesn't mean everybody is successful. So I'd love to hear about some of the things that you feel like really support a student in completing and transforming.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to start with experience formula, core experience number one, which is mission. And it's the opposite of too many masters, which you can see here on the other side.
Mhm.
So the idea of a mission is that there's a really clear finish line of your program or your course where you can almost photograph someone crossing the finish line. Because if you think about it, so often you see courses and they're like, learn everything you need to know about Microsoft Excel or whatever it happens to be. Learn everything that you need to know to fall in love with your soulmate. It's like these gigantic things. And there's no clear finish line. And so people don't know what winning looks like. And if you don't know what winning looks like, you don't know how this is immediately relevant in your life and exactly the results that you're going to get or the problem you're going to solve by doing it. Why even start? Because we're all so freaking busy. So a lot of people make their courses too broad. They try to serve too many masters. They, out of good intentions, want to give people everything they need to fill in the blank, right? And it's just way too
Yeah.
much. And it just feels like a fire hose kind of coming at you versus focusing in on just what's the one thing that I can do and really deliver, like the 8 spiritual secrets for multiplying your money. It's really clear, it's really specific, and that clarity and specificity creates an amazing positive experience. Also, it differentiates you from all the other programs that are trying to do everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this is all about. And even if you have a program on personal development or you have a program on spirituality, you can still do it. So I actually have a story of a couple who came to work with me, which is Kay and Helmut Whitaker. And they were actually shamans and had written this book on called The Accidental Shaman. And I remember when he came to me, he wanted to kind of create a class to teach people this form of shamanism. And it was one that came from South America. And he said, well, Marisa, I don't know if this is possible. It takes 17 years to actually pass on the lineage and the tradition. And I'm like, Helmut, you can't like sell something that's going to take people
Yeah.
17 years to complete, right? And it was so funny because he so he's like, okay, you can't, you just can't do that, Helmet. And he was like, but I don't want to promise instant enlightenment. There's no instant enlightenment when it
Yeah.
comes to something like spirituality, right? And I said, well, I understand that they're not going to snap their fingers and start to levitate and all of a sudden become enlightened or
Right.
anything like that. But could people experience some of these things like universal love for a fraction of a second? And he says, yes, they could. So here is the mission statement
Ooh,
that
I
we
love this.
with him. And he came on one of the calls with me and we kind of drafted this together. And I use a really specific template because it shifts you from your perspective of what you want to teach and offer to what you're inviting people to say yes to. And that creates a very different kind of promise because
Mm,
oftentimes we lead with what we do versus what are people going to receive? What are they going to do? And
right.
that's kind of this important difference here. So the sentence starter is your mission, should you choose to accept it, as blank. And this is the mission statement that we crafted together with Helmet. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to receive through the 6-week shamanic initiation the 4 essential energies and gifts that every human needs to feel whole, loved, and on path: the gift of knowing your truth, the gift of connecting to your life energy, the gift of a quiet mind, and the gift of opening to the infinite, right? And now this kind of like shamanic transmission program
Yes.
became grounded in the 4 gifts of the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. And it's funny because he then sent an email just sharing this mission statement with, I think it was like 18 people or something. And he made 21 sales. And it was basically $11,000 just like that because it was so clear and specific that people could now imagine what they were receiving it. And if you can
Yes.
imagine it, you can actually become it and you can achieve it, right? And so part of this is giving people a picture that they can clearly imagine. They see that finish line and then linking that finish line to what that also looks like in the context of their lives. That's what I call the future self, which is the second kind of core experience. So when you do that, you're no longer giving information or stuff or teaching. You're inviting people on this journey with a specific destination in mind. And that creates a lot of incentive or desire to buy because they know what the finish line looks like. They can see the outcome in their mind's eye. And then it creates a commitment container in the course. Because then rather than just getting flooded with information and why is this relevant? What can I do this now? They know that everything that you deliver in the program is one step on the journey to core experience 10, which is mission accomplished, right? And
Yeah.
that's their finish line that you can then incentivize and reward. And you take everything else out of the course or the program that doesn't get them to that finish line, which also relieves the pressure on you feeling like you need to know and deliver and teach absolutely anything people could possibly need in this whole domain of knowledge or expertise that you're in. And you're just teaching this one specific outcome. You're just teaching the 8 spiritual secrets of multiplying your money.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so you exactly answered the question that I was going to ask, which is I think sometimes, especially we have a lot of life coaches that listen to this podcast, whether they were certified at Brave Thinking Institute or not, lots of life coaches. And I think because as life coaches, we know how much we know and how much we want to transform and the transformation that can happen. And you've helped us consider, Marisa, how it can feel so big to say, you're going to build your dream. It's like, well, I've never built it before and that just feels so big and I don't even have a dream yet. And so it's funny because as you were talking about, having a, something mission accomplished, I could feel like the old life coach in me, like a little anxiety rising up, like, oh my gosh, what do I promise? So it's so helpful to see in that example, what the client was going to receive is these 4 gifts.
Mhm.
And I know by the end, if I've received those 4 gifts, I've accomplished my mission and therefore right on, well done.
And it leads to happy clients because
Yes.
they got the transformation you promised versus like, I don't really know. I feel this, I feel that. I did this, I did that.
Yes.
They are happy. And when they're happy, guess what they do? They give you glowing testimonials.
Yes.
They refer you to their friends and they buy more from you, right?
Yes.
And then your business just continues to grow.
Yeah.
And you get to have long kind of like long-term relationships with your clients versus short-term kind of one night stand, which a lot of
Yeah.
people have, right? They do one thing and they're out because it was just too big or too much or
Mhm.
whatever it happens to be.
And then you're always in the game of this, like, you've mentioned it before. I've heard you say on YouTube, like this feast or famine of like, you're constantly in that if you're not receiving those long-term relationships with clients. I also love that when you gave Helmut's example, he emailed it or shared it with, however he did it, 18 people, but he made 21 sales. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is that when someone feels really connected to something, they're going to share it with their friends. They want their community to know. They're going to say, hey, do this with me. So
Uh-huh.
brilliant.
Yep. And as they can specifically say what it is versus, yeah, like this life coach, she just helps me with like the different areas of my life and my limiting blocks and where I'm stuck and overcome my biggest blocks. And then I get better results in life and I'm happier and I'm more glowy and radiant and all of these things. And I think even my relationship improves. I think I heal my family patterns. And do you want to do it with me?
Oh my God, what is happening? No, I do not want to do that. So true. This is so helpful. So I just want to highlight for all of our coaches, notice that the promise was you'll receive these 4 gifts or you'll receive these 8 spiritual secrets to multiply your money. It wasn't how to become a millionaire in 5 days, because we know, as Helmut said, I can't make a promise that they're going to understand this whole shamanic journey that took me or takes people 17 years. Like that, we want to be integral in knowing that I can't make a promise that this is going to happen overnight. And so it's so helpful, Marisa, to know what promises can I make that satisfies the client, that starts them on their journey.
And that's
So
actually a big objection that people have too, is like, well, I can't guarantee that this person's going to show up and receive all the transmissions. But that's this kind of desire to take responsibility for people. And so this formula is about being responsible to them, setting them up for the success, giving them their best shot at attaining this particular goal, but then letting go of feeling responsible for them to take the result because they still have to show up. They still have to do the work. And when you do this, you can even do things like guarantee the promise. For example, in my Experience Product Master class, our mission is to design, launch, and profit from an experience product, which is simply any kind of one-on-one program or course, digital product, whatever that uses all 10 core experiences. They design, launch, and profit from it. Then we're able to create a make your money back guarantee. Because if you do the work, which means, completing all the different program milestones, you show up to your coaching, you actually, market your program and you don't make these sales, we're going to give you your money back. And then that becomes even more compelling because we can stand behind the mission of the program. And that encourages people to not just sign up, but encourages people to show up because when they know they can't fail and their success is even guaranteed, and that's the next level. That might still be a little bit even scary for you, but when
yeah,
they know that, then they know that I'm confident. And sometimes they will do the work even when their internal motivation flags to stay eligible for the guarantee. And guess what? When they do the work, ba-da, they
yeah,
get the results. And I think
100%.
for everybody. So I offer the guarantee not just to make more sales, but because once people buy, it encourages them to actually continue because they have no way to fail, right?
Yes, and that's just another way of engaging, not just making a course and leaving it to the side, just go do the course, good luck. But that's just another way of engaging. I love that because oftentimes I'm sharing with our coaches. So we have a lot of very heart-centered coaches who get scared. I was totally scared the first time I sold the DreamBuilder program as a DreamBuilder coach, and I charged for a group $997. It was 12 weeks, small group, and I was like, $997 as a school teacher, that was like a quarter of my paycheck. So I was like, how can I charge $997? Like, it just seemed insane to me. And so it took me a long time to understand the value that I was giving. And then as I saw people getting results, I'm like, oh, I could charge 5 times this because people are getting such great results. But one of the things I'm telling people that are at where I was, like, how can I charge $997 is they're so afraid, like you're saying, that the client isn't going to receive the result of like changing their whole life. And so one of the things I tell them, and I think it's very similar to what you're saying with your money back guarantee, is that if the client did every single thing in the
Mhm.
Dream Builder
Yeah.
program and did the coaching with you, would their life improve? And they're like, oh, no doubt. And so it's like giving us, again, not, we call it not codependent, but sometimes I'll call it overcare. Like, we
Mhm.
want to care, but when you get to that level of overcare where you're trying to take responsibility for their whole program, You can't do that because we can't get into their head and make them do the work.
Also, when it comes to pricing, is that initial conversation you were having in your own head of 997 was based on how much you make as a school teacher, right? Versus the value you can
That's right.
provide. So the good thing about this mission is it's not what you offer. They're not saying yes to what you have to offer. They're saying yes to the transformation that they can get through your course or through your program. So when you understand that too, and that's part of the reason this is so powerful, is that it shifts your focus away from you and your current kind of like understanding of your own value and worth to the value of the
That's right.
transformation. And so that relieves some of the insecurities as well, or the challenges that so many of us have the first time we go live with something.
Yes.
Then it allows you to start charging higher and higher prices as you start to get more experience and you increase the level of transformation or the speed of transformation or the depth of transformation or the specificity of transformation. And that's what really allows you to build that sort of thriving business around what you do. And it
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. And so shifting from your perspective to the perspective of the people you serve and what they have to gain really is a game changer in so many different ways. And it allows me to, when I'm not finding the motivation to, I realize my work is bigger than myself. And so if I'm
Mm.
holding back, I'm actually holding back on a solution that I know is going to change people's lives, which makes me selfish. Does that make sense?
It
In some
makes
way, shape,
perfect
or
sense.
form, right?
Because my first client that I had as a DreamBuilder coach with the DreamBuilder program, her name was Marie, and I think she had been an assistant property manager and she wanted to be a property manager. In the 12 weeks of DreamBuilder coaching with me, she went and got a new job and it was a $15,000 pay raise. So when I thought back to that 997, I was like, oh my gosh, I almost held back on offering this because I was afraid. And the value she got out of 997 was 15,000. That's a great return on investment.
And
Like
that's just the
value.
immediate short-term value, but when you see this value compounds over somebody's life, it could lead to expanding someone's earning capacity for the rest of their career, for example.
Yeah. So this value, I'm so happy that you connected that piece about the value that the client is receiving. So um, the next thing I wanted to hear is that when a coach is thinking about creating something online, an experience product, is there something here for the beginning coach? Like, is there ever a time that's too early to start with an online product? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So what I'm talking about is an experience product. So an experience product can actually be some kind of one-on-one offer. So I teach this kind of what I call this experience product flight plan. And these first three steps is what I call the MVP loop. Okay. And it's really about finding your profitable product idea. And then this is what I call creating your idea to market blueprint, which is how do you wrap an offer around that idea? Because people aren't buying your idea, they're buying your offer. And an offer oftentimes goes beyond, just the core thing. And then you have the MVP launch. So the idea is you figure out what the core solution of what you do is, and then you test it in the simplest way possible. So let me give you an example. I have a student, Kat Corroy, who came to me and she had done some work with kind of branding agencies in London and wasn't really sure what to do as a course. She tried to create a physical product business selling purses, but it was expensive and it wasn't going fast enough. And she was kind of running out of cash. So she's like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And through our process, came up with the idea of an Instagram makeover program. But to test the idea, she tested it with a one-on-one offer, selling, I think it was $500 or $1,000 Instagram makeovers to individuals where she could help them rebrand their feed. And that went really, really well. From there, she did a small group. And then from there, she created a course that's now had over 1,000 people in the program. So she did this MVP loop to kind of really test the core solution. So and I'm just going to try to sit up so you can still see my
Yeah,
face.
and for anyone that's listening to this podcast on Apple or Spotify and can't see Marisa's visuals, definitely jump over to YouTube if you want to see the visuals. But she's walking you through it really well by audio, so you'll be able to know what she's doing
Yeah.
here.
So a lot of times people come in with this gigantic dream, like I want this huge course with 1,000 people in it. And that's what I call the jet plane version of your course. And so they, start by creating one piece of the program at a time. And then it takes them a year or 2 years or 3 years. And they still haven't tested their idea. So when they launch, it may not even fly. So what I'm help people do is, well, what's the minimum viable product? What's the minimum viable version of your core solution? So if you think about it, what's the minimum viable version of an airplane? Well, if I put wings on something, will it fly? So let's create the paper plane version of this first. That's our one Instagram makeover program. And then we can do the hang glider, then the propeller plane, like the biplane and the propeller plane and the jet plane. And you can kind of gradually enhance your program one step at a time. And this isn't just a philosophy for course creators. This is actually what Airbnb did, which is now a gigantic kind of global
Mm-hmm.
billion-dollar company. Do you know how they actually started out?
Mm-mm.
It was these two RISD grads, Rhode Island School of Design art students, and they were run out of cash to pay their rent in San Francisco, which was really expensive. And they saw that there was an industrial design conference in town because they were designers, and that every hotel room was booked out, so people couldn't find places. And they thought, well, what if we just buy a couple air beds, we throw them in our living room, and then we list it online and see if people will come and stay. So they got 3 air beds and they sold out the entire thing for the whole event. And they tested the core solution, which is, will someone rent a room in somebody's house from that they didn't know from the internet, right? And they started with one apartment in
Yep.
one city over one weekend, not even with real beds, with air
Yep.
beds, right? Airbnb. And from there, they rolled it out to all of San Francisco, then additional major cities in the US. Then they entered other countries. And then finally, they became this global firm. And then they added Airbnb experiences to it. And there you go. So they could have had the money or the relationships or the experience, which is critical too, to do this global kind of movement right from the start. But they just tested it in their own home. And so many people bypass this because they have this grand, big vision and it's beautiful. And then they feel like any little step is sort of betraying the bigness and the beauty of the vision, and so they never get started, or they protract the process for years, and then when they release, they're releasing something that didn't have the benefit of being perfected with your audience, where you're collaborating with them on what they want and need, just not just what you have to offer. So all of those iteration cycles are also essential to get to the best version of your idea. And I'm like, I have another thing that I'm all about my little
Yeah,
visuals. I
I
know
love
people are watching on audio, but there's a thing that I call, which is the iterate your way to awesome cycle. And this is where you have an idea and you take action on the idea, which creates clarity, which creates momentum, and your idea gets better and better. So you have the confidence to take more action and get more clarity and more momentum. And it's this beautiful virtuous cycle. But what most people do is they stay in the stuck cycle. And this is where you have an idea, you proceed to overanalyze it, which just makes you more and more confused. So you procrastinate and you never really leave the idea cycle. And this is what people have, especially the kind of visionary, heart centered people who want to change the world, is that they just don't even know where to begin. And so they try to build this gigantic thing, like one piece at a time, versus let's just do a simple version of this. Let's test that simple version. Let's get it to market. Let's get the clarity that comes with real people paying you real money to experience your stuff, and then getting the feedback, and then seeing, okay, does this serve? What else do they want? How would I make this different? How do I refine it? And it ends up being so much easier than you'd expect. I've had students who do this MVP cycle in as little as 24 hours. And I had a student who he had a program that was actually helping church leaders create a cycle of like a culture of giving in their churches. And so he went and he did a presentation in the church, and he didn't get any sales. But what he did is he pulled people aside and said, walked through the presentation and said, well, what didn't resonate with you? And they told him, duh, 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 duh. He changed it. He had another presentation that same day. And then he got like all of these sales. And it was that fast. He just had to get his crappy first version out the door, see that how it works, and then make updates based on people's feedback versus making it about them and feeling like he had to make it perfect before it even goes out, because it can't be perfect because you don't have the experience and you don't have the feedback. That's the only way to refine it and make it better and better.
That's right. I mean, this is so important, is that we're not getting feedback if we're not taking action, because we can overanalyze, we can dream up what it'll be like, we can do all of this. One of our tools, one of our brave thinking tools at the Institute is do what you can where you are with what you have. So what he could do was go out and give that presentation, crappy version, whatever it was. He then got feedback. And we can't know until we do that. So I think this is so important because I love the idea. I could test this with someone one-to-one. I could go give a presentation at my church. There's a lot of things I can do where I am with what I have before I think I have to spend $500,000 building some sort of fancy online course, right? So
Mhm.
this is great, Marisa. So I wanted to talk about, I watched one of your videos where you talked about personalizing. And I think one of the things so we have a lot of coaches that they've been one-to-one coaches forever and they want to move to group coaching. And then they get all this fear that it's not going to be personal anymore. So I can imagine how it must feel when you think about going from real like hands-on group coaching to an online product, then the fear that like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to help them as much, or it's not going to be as personal, or they're not going to feel like I care. So I'd love to hear about your take on personalizing to an email list, to an online product, I thought it was fabulous, the video I watched on your YouTube channel about personalizing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think a lot of times personalization comes from experience. So if you have that experience as a one-on-one coach, then you already know a lot about the people that you serve. And the truth is that we are probably all 80% similar and just 20% different as humans. We have the same fears, we have the same challenges, we have the same anxieties. So if you've been able to take people one on one through your process, more than one person, you know where they get hung up, right? You know where they get stuck. And yes, some things are individual to a person, but the patterns start to emerge. And also, another reason I recommend doing MVP version. So for many of my students, they'll deliver on Zoom and just give Zoom recordings as the first version. They won't go and record and like have to go in a studio. First of all, that's way more work. It takes way more time, but you lose the advantage of delivering your program live to a small group, and then you can watch the chat and be like, wait, can you say that again, or wait, clarify that, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. And then you see where people are getting stuck, or even where they start to push back and they're like, no, I can't do that. And then you can address and be more spontaneous on the fly, and then you also know where you need to kind of patch up your program. So what you'll do is, as you lead a group through it, it does change the dynamic a bit, but you do that several times and you listen. So my signature course, the Experience Product Masterclass, I'm doing my ninth cohort, going into my ninth cohort. And the very first time, it was 8 weeks and I delivered it live. Almost every single day I showed up and delivered it live. And then the next time I decided to pre record it, but it was just slides and my voice. And that was 10 weeks long. Didn't deliver it live anymore, but I showed up for coaching instead. Then, after I think it was maybe 5 years of delivering that version with coaching and adding pieces to it, I recorded the whole thing direct to camera, beautiful in a studio, masterclass.com style, and everyone loves it. But that took me 5 years to get to that jet plane version of the course. And the number of times people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It feels like you're reading my mind. This was exactly what I wanted to know now, right? It's because all of those 5 years of experience and I just addressed all the questions. One of the things that I found 5 years in was people were saying, but Marisa, you didn't really teach me how to create a course in here. I'm like, what are you talking about? The whole thing is about creating your course. But then I realized I didn't actually have a training showing them how to put together a single training. And what is the anatomy of a single individual training? And then how do you roll trainings up into modules? So there was like, okay, there was this kind of mechanical piece that they wanted to know. So even though I taught them all this other stuff, I missed this one thing. So that's their perception of what a course is the actual unit of an individual training. And I was teaching this whole, and so I needed to drill into the micros. So I added those pieces. And now I don't get that feedback anymore. So it's just listening and then seeing, okay, how could they have gone through that entire program and tell me that? And I've done everything that I've ever created. And that gradually gets better and better and better and better and better. And people are happier and happier until I don't feel like there's anything to enhance. But actually, that never happens. So even in, there's still things to enhance because the world is changing and the
Yeah.
customer expectations are changing and technology changes. So then I add some things to kind of adapt to the changes in the world, and it keeps going.
I think this is so important. What I love about this is for all of you who have thought it has to be perfect from the start, or I have to have, it's interesting because in this company, a lot of our coaches are looking at Mary Morrissey and what Mary Morrissey is doing now. And they think if I don't have the studio and the video and this expensive program and this and this, that I can't be successful. And I always remind them that Mary Morrissey, when she started what became Brave Thinking Institute, she had just gone bankrupt and she didn't have a credit card. So she was not having a studio and all of these things. And so what I love about what you're saying is notice that if it was that we had to be perfect at the start, Marisa would not be going 5 years later, 7 years later, because it wasn't perfect at the start and people loved her and people kept buying because she was listening. So as long as you're willing to listen.
And one of the questions that I always ask my students is, what if your third course or your fourth course, even your fifth course became that blockbuster hit product that put you on the map and kind of opened the doors and brought in a lot of money and a lot of opportunities? Would you create course number 1, 2, and 3, even if it wasn't as awesome as you wanted it to get to that course number 4 that was the blockbuster hit? They all say yes, right? And yet we want course number 1 to be this blockbuster hit, but we're still learning, and
Yeah.
that takes time. And so most authors are great musicians. It's not their first album or it's not their first book that becomes the one that they become famous for. Many of them, it takes them, time. Some people, maybe it's like the second book. Some people, maybe it's 20 years in. So it depends, and you don't need to wait 20 years these days, because I think we're in a cycle of rapid change and
Yeah.
rapid evolution and tools and coaches and resources. So you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from a framework. You're starting from a system. And if you follow that, then the iteration cycle is so much faster.
It's going to be so much faster. Especially, I really want to encourage everyone to go to Marisa's YouTube channel to check out her courses, her masterclass, because there's a wealth of information that's going to cut the learning curve for all of us starting to build an online product. I will share that, and many of the listeners have heard this story before, but my very first funnel that I tried to create, I had like this whole like super intricate, like multi-part masterclass. And I spent like $15,000 on this funnel. I did the thing that I didn't take your advice. I was like, oh, I'm going to make this perfect from the start. And it completely flopped. It was a failure. It wasn't what people wanted. It was weird. It was intricate. And I remember calling Matt Boggs, our executive director, the co-founder of the coach certification division, and crying and being like, tell me there's a way to salvage this. And he looked at it and he's like, yeah, no. So you gotta take what you learned and start fresh. And it was such a great learning experience, which actually led to my first successful course that I created on my own. I took the feedback, I went with it. But it's a great learning for all of us that your first one might not be a big hit, but that first one I created led to my first $1 million year. It was the feedback from that first failure that I thought, oh my gosh, $15,000. Like, I feel like I've ruined my family's life because I've spent all this money and it failed, led to the $1 million year, but only because I was willing to take the feedback that I got from it, like Marisa's saying here. So good learning for all of us. Don't freak
100%.
out if the first one isn't perfect.
As they say, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And a lot of times it's the failure that leads to the feedback that leads to the breakthrough. And
That's
you're
right.
kind of holding your breakthrough back because you want perfection out of the gate, and perfection's not possible, especially if you're designing something for other people, because
That's right.
you can't anticipate everything they possibly need and want and where they're going to get stuck. You just have to do it enough times to get to that point where it's like really dialed in.
Yes, love it. So, word to the wise for all our coaches here: stop thinking about it, stop researching it, do what you can, take this minimum viable product that Marisa's sharing with us and get that feedback, because that's going to lead you to that first big breakthrough for sure. We've all done it. We've all been there. So, okay, I have a couple listener questions. So I polled our coaches in our Facebook group. I was like, I get to interview Marisa Murgatroyd. What do you want me to ask? So I'm going to ask some of these coach questions that came in for you. So this came from one of our coaches, Mary Walker. So she is wondering about the marketing of things. So in her particular case, is there a best platform to target successful women who want more fulfillment, was her particular question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this can be a broader question for all of our listeners about finding the right platform to market this course that you come up with.
All right. So the thing that I recommend you do is not think about the one platform. And instead, just like there's minimum viable product, there's also a minimum viable marketing and minimum viable technology. And so one of the things that I like to share, and this is a resource, this is what I call your circle of influence. So a lot of times you probably know successful women who want more fulfillment. Am I right? We all know successful women who want more fulfillment. And of course, I think we can get more specific there, partly by creating a mission and everything else and getting even clearer on exactly who this person is and exactly the transformation you offer. But a lot of times when you start out just realizing that your ideal customers are everywhere, they're not necessarily just on Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube or TikTok or whatever on the place that you resist. They're absolutely everywhere. And a lot of times, the closer you go to the center of your circle of influence, which is friends or associates that you're connected to, or even friends of friends, the easier it is to market, and the easier your marketing is, because there's some level of relationship or connection. So you're not just some rando off the internet who's kind of in their feed, through cold traffic or advertising or something like that. So people who start, just paying ads, trying to beat the algorithms on whatever platform to total strangers, it's a really hard way to start. Plus, you don't get that same feedback that you need to get to see whether your work marketing is working. So what you did is you went build a funnel straight for strangers. You tried to start with the most advanced, sophisticated form of marketing, and you didn't have the feedback, not just on your program, but on your marketing to know what was working to make the investment worth it.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people go out there also with the jet plane marketing. It's what I call Lamborghini marketing. And I actually contrast it to what I call golf cart marketing. Like, can you get to the grocery store in your neighborhood on a golf cart, or do you need to drive a Lamborghini? You could totally do it in a golf cart. So why build the Lambo or try to catch the Lambo when a golf cart will do? So keep it super simple. Sometimes just things like authentic posting and sharing, and what I call chatterboxing, which is engaging with people all around you on any platform that you happen to already be on. You don't have to go kind of develop and start from scratch somewhere brand new. If you've got a profile anywhere and you're connected to people anywhere, start there. If you're in communities, it could be local communities, or they could be peer groups, or they could be global communities. Start there. Start wherever you're connected, right?
Mhm.
Field test it using your mission and your future self, and a couple of the other elements that I like to teach, like a bird's eye view, which is a path to mission accomplished, right? Start there by having clarity on some of the core elements, test those, and also share and be visible, which, and then that oftentimes will lead to your first clients, because you may only need, you know, 4, 5, 6 clients to test your idea. Am I right? You don't need a whole lot. So why build this huge platform and this huge presence or this 1,000-person following to get, what we're talking about is a handful of clients, right? Start with where you're already connected, and just work on your messaging, get clarity first, test that out, in the simplest possible ways. And it's the connection, the presence, which matters. Presence is more important than perfection. So if you show up where you're already connected, whether that's in person or online or any platform whatsoever, you share authentically, you've got the clarity, you've really fine tuned some of these elements, then you're going to get the response. And
Yeah.
so people fight me on this, like, no, it's got to be hard, and I got to be on Facebook, or I got to be on Instagram, or I heard this, or now TikTok is where all the kids are. And then, like, they come in with all these preset ideas, and so they have to start from scratch on those platforms, and it takes time for the algorithms to catch on, and it feels like a losing battle, right, where you have to take so many steps just to get a few clients and test your idea, but then your idea is unproven, so you're trying to build all this stuff around this kind of fuzzy notions, and it just becomes this cycle of struggle, right?
This is so, I'm like, thank you. It's so funny because I always feel like sometimes with our certified coaches that I'm like the school marm being like, eat your vegetables, because I'm always sharing about starting with the people, the things that are easy, that kind of thing. So when I have an expert like you come on and validate, I'm like, yes, I'm not the only one who's like, eat your veggies. And this is, when I looked back, when I closed my business and came over to Brave Thinking Institute, I took a look at clients in my high level masterclass. So a $10,000 year-long masterclass, looked at those like 120 so clients and looked at where did each one of them come from. Most of them came from the center of that circle that you just showed, the friends, the acquaintances who brought friends and told friends. Even though I was doing Facebook ads, doing marketing online, a smaller percentage came from there because it's the relationship and it's going to convert higher, and the cold traffic, they just don't have that level of trust and relationship with you. So really, like, take to heart what Marisa's saying here about start with the women that you already know who are influential, who are successful, who are seeking more. Test it. It's so, so valuable.
That, and then that gives you confidence, and then you fine tune your messaging in the process. So, more directly too. So a lot of times this is what I call connection based marketing. So before you can go to production based marketing and have this big channel with lots of people, you got to connect with them and then see what messages resonate and test them. And as you get better, now I have multi-million-dollar launches and things, but I didn't have it when I got started. I was just like going to events and meeting people, talking to them, getting to know them, and all of that. And a lot of people say, well, what if I'm an introvert? Well, do you have any relationships in your life? Are there any people that you've connected with successfully before? You do know how to connect. We all know how to connect. We connect since we're children. So what a lot of times we feared, connecting in a way that's related to our business, but it still starts the same way. Connection starts with connection,
Yeah.
right? And that's what matters, because when you build a connection, the transactions often result. But when you start with the transaction, no connection's possible and people aren't interested. So connection's still connection. And this is the way to start. I've seen it over and over and over again. I've had 16,000 students, the people who try to begin with the big platforms, and it does not work.
I love this because it's also going to save when your message is so much more dialed in because you've tested it with what we would traditionally call your warm market, your circle of influence, and you've got these raving fans and you're constantly refining and improving your product. By the time you get to a Facebook ad, you're going to save so much money, time, heartache, because
Yeah.
you're not putting the minimum product out on a platform that's going to cost a lot of money and then being like me, calling Matt Boggs saying, please tell me there's a way to save this investment. It's like, it's going to save so much time, money. So our next coach question comes from our coach, Inga Mascoon. And she asked about, there's so much information online about building online programs, about digital marketing, about all these things. So I think you've covered a lot of this already, Marisa, but what are 3 actions for a beginner wanting to go digital? I think you've already done it. I think you've already shared this, but if you just want to like give us the boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, focus on a very, very specific outcome or promise. Go deep rather than wide. That's going to differentiate you more than anybody else. Then turn that into the minimum viable product, the paper plain version of your program, and then leverage minimum viable marketing, really focusing on the center of your circle of influence. Of course, there are very specific conversations to have and ways to have those conversations and things to do, ways to kind of start the conversation, identify who your people are, but go simple across the board first. And then test it in the easiest possible way, the minimum viable product, minimum viable marketing, minimum viable technology. Once you prove your offer, and I say you can prove it with just 3 sales. Why 3? One could be luck, 2 could be a fluke, but 3 starts to be a proven model. Then you can start to move on. So this whole process doesn't have to take a huge amount of time either. But when you resist it, or you try to go big, or you try to build the jet plane, or you try to build the funnel, the $15,000 funnel, that's when it takes a really long time. But if you just slow down and be where you are and take the simple steps to kind of validate your idea, test your idea, simplify your idea, you can actually do it really, really fast.
So great. So encouraging to go, oh, I can start proving this with 3 sales. Like that's just so nice for the coach to hear who's been thinking they have to go so big, so fast, and they're not successful if it's not, like you said, the $1 million launch or whatever it is. So I want to talk a little bit about how you've supported Brave Thinking Institute with 8 spiritual secrets to multiplying your money and the new DreamBuilder program, which just launched. So one of the things that you shared with us that was so very helpful for us, because again, we're all heart centered. Now, I want you to hear this. Brave Thinking Institute is an 8 going on 9-figure company right now. And we still are asking questions about how do we most reach our client? How do we improve? So I don't want you to feel like just because you're a beginning coach, this is the only time you're going to be having this conversation. Like if you are growing, hopefully you're having this conversation all the time, even at 8 figures or 9 figures or whatever it is you aspire to. We're still asking questions about how do we best reach and support the people that we're wanting to serve. So I just want to start with that. But one of the things that you really supported us with, especially within the DreamBuilder program, and of course, 8 Spiritual Secrets, is helping people get a quick win at the start of their program with you. So would you be willing, moving the microphone. I know my husband oftentimes edits the sound and production on these podcasts. And so every time I hit my microphone or make noises, I'm like, oh, he's going to be like, we're editing this out. What are you doing over there? I'm Italian. I like speak with my hands. So starting fresh on that question, would you be willing to share with us some strategies for helping your clients get quick wins in the program?
Yeah, 100%. And are you open if I share any more details of that from DreamBuilder, or you want to keep
Yeah,
it?
go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
I think one of the things that with the original DreamBuilder is that there was so much heart and soul and intention in that to just transform people's lives from head to toe, right? Transform in the area of career and money and relationships and health and family, all of these domains. And so what people entering the program were like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to do all at once. And so the suggestion was to actually practice the whole dream builder process, but with a very small kind of dream, like a little micro dream versus this whole dream life from the start. And then practice all the steps of the process with this micro dream in one of the four areas rather than have this dream, that expansive dream that hits all of the different areas and things, because that felt it's overwhelming. It's too much from someone. They're trying to learn a process, but they're also trying to change their entire life. It's a lot, right? So we kind of distilled it down to kind of identifying the smaller piece and then practicing on the smaller piece and then expanding into the bigger piece once you've, had that practice and that muscle memory. So another example from one of my students, and this is an example that I love, is he had a course on helping people get their music on TV shows. And his very first step in the process was to send these creative musicians to the studio websites to kind of fill out the paperwork so they can become eligible for submission. And I'm like, man, you're asking these artists to go fill out paperwork as the first step. There's a reason why you're not seeing a high success rate and a high engaging rate. They're stopping before they even get started. So we redesigned that first step in the program. And instead, I guided him on creating what I call the Dream 50 list, which is what are the 50 TV shows that if you were on even one of these shows, this course would be a huge win for you. And then make this so no-brainer easy, this step, that everybody could do it. Like they didn't even have to do research. He would compile the list of all of the eligible shows by genre. So all they had to do is look at the list and choose the shows. And then every single time they put a show on their Dream 50 list, they're actually imagining themselves and their music being on that show. Am I right? And that's reinforcing the core promise of the program to get your music listed on one or more TV shows. Is that right? So that very first thing that you ask people to do, you want them to win. You want to remove all barriers. You want to make it as simple as possible. Any challenge they could have, you want to actually take care of it for them. And then you want that win to reinforce the promise of the entire program. So it's creating a future self vision as well.
I love that. So in this case, with this program about getting on a television show as a musician, the quick win is I know that first of all, I have a resource, which is I don't have to come up with the 50. I can look at this list and see what I would love. And now I've created this list. It's reinforced where I'm going. So it doesn't have to be, sometimes I think, at least the way my brain works, is you feel like it has to be so big or such a big thing. And it's like, no, just making that list and reinforcing the vision is a win. Like stop complicating it.
100%. So a lot of times the way people approach designing a course is what I call linear. The first step is the first step, and then the second step is the second step. In this formula is about actually looking at how do you organize something motivationally. So understanding about organizing something motivationally is that people start out with a lot of fear and not a lot of skills. So in order to help them build confidence, you actually have to help them build confidence and skills simultaneously. So you want to start with something small and easy so they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as I made it out to in my mind. Oh, let me do the next thing. But the next thing can't be huge either. So you're actually ramping people up. That's the phenomenon of unstoppable momentum. It's how you ramp people up from small, simple actions and wins to larger and larger actions and wins. So you're kind of taking people on this. Now, there might be times where you give them something big, then make the next thing a little bit simpler, for example.
Yes.
So you want a rhythm where they've got enough momentum before they hit that hard, sticky thing that their action is going to propel them through the harder, sticky thing. The thing that they couldn't have done at the front, the start, if they can do it like over here. And then they're building capacity, they're building confidence, they become unstoppable. So it's not enough just to have the wins. You actually have to sequence the wins in a way where people are gaining momentum. And you have to kind of understand what to put in what order. So you're helping people expand their skill set and their confidence along the way before they get to the kind of gnarly parts of your program. And it may be things out of order.
I love that. And so for those of you who are one of our 5,000 trained and certified coaches that I know so many of you listen to this podcast, just know that the changes that we made with Marisa's help to the DreamBuilder program, you absolutely have that opportunity available to you as a coach to have the new DreamBuilder program and coach in that way. We have an all new curriculum for you. So it's super exciting. So thank you, Marisa, because when I saw the changes that were made to the DreamBuilder program and that our coaches, I was going to then create the curriculum for our coaches. I was like, this is so thrilling because our clients are just going to, they were already having massive wins, but I think it's just going to be exponential now because of the changes that you supported us in making. So
That was
Great.
super fun sitting down with the team for that day and just kind of getting in there and tinkering with all the things to just remove the friction, you know, from
Yeah.
the process and create the momentum and the rewards and that kind of escalating feeling where people get more excited versus they decline over time, that you're actually building people up.
Yes, yes, I love it because we would often see it sometimes in week 4, people would start to just get like a lot of turmoil around it, and I think we're going to see that. We're going to see that diminish now. So I wanted to ask you a personal question, if I may. So I've heard around campus. That's what we say when we talk around Brave Thinking Institute. I've heard around campus that you have what would be we might call a great work-life balance, like allowing yourself to travel and do different things that are nourishing to your soul. So as someone who in my life has had to learn this because I had kind of had an overwork or hard work paradigm, I'd love to hear your tips on how do you give yourself permission to take some time off and travel or do different things like that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, one of the things that I always teach my students is to have three whys, not just one. One is called the big altruistic why, which is the reason your business exists. It's the kind of service that you offer to the world. The second one is the big intrinsic why, which is how do you want to feel each day as you do your business so you can be in that state of flow or energy, excitement. You want the work itself to feel fun, to be its own reward, regardless of what happens. And the third is a big selfish why, which is what does doing this allow you to do in your life that you wouldn't otherwise? So for me, my big selfish why is my business allows me to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, for however long I want, where I want, right? And
Yeah.
that excites me. And so I know that, you know, that altruistic motivation, it can run out. So you have to sustain that like feeling of being in the flow in your business as well in the day to day. And sometimes that means getting out of the day to day too. And I also know that for me to give at a bigger level, I have to balance giving and receiving. There has to be that reciprocity in my life. Otherwise, I can't sustain the giving, or I become angry and resentful and, not a nice person to be around. So, with all my big expenditures of energy and giving, I have to refill. I have to allow myself to be supported and to receive. I also know with new inputs comes new outputs. So if I'm ever feeling stuck or whatever, simply stepping away gets things firing again, right?
Hmm. I love that. If you're watching on YouTube, you will see that I'm taking notes because this is what we're doing, learning, growing. So I'm looking down, I'm taking notes. This is so great, Marisa. I so appreciate the massive value that you're always bringing to us. So I want to ask you a question I always ask as the last question on this podcast. So have you ever seen the show Undercover Billionaire?
I think I've seen the trailer.
Okay, so basically, they take this billionaire, they take away all their resources. So, no email list, no cell phone, no black book, and they have to start a business from scratch in 90 days and make $1 million, basically. So, they go undercover in some city. So, I'm basically asking you to be the undercover billionaire, the undercover course creator right now. I take away your email list. You can't use your email list. You can't use your social media following. You can use, the wisdom that you've gained over time, but you can't use any of the assets that you've built.
Mhm.
What would be the first step if you were creating a coaching business with none of those assets?
Well, the first step is actually to get very specific. It's what I call micro niche. So the process is to mega niche and then to micro niche. And then from there, create your core solution, which, like I said, core solution for an airplane is if you put wings on something, will it fly? From there, choose an audience. And then from there, get hyper specific on the outcome of what your package can deliver. And I would do that by talking to people. I actually have this kind of process mapped out and a free guide to help you kind of find this mega niche first, because that's the first step. And I'm happy to kind of give it to everybody here.
Yeah, good. Tell us where we can get it. I love, and then let me, before you share that, say, I love that your first step was talking to people.
Mhm.
It wasn't build the funnel as we covered earlier, talking to people. So if you could share, how do we get the mega niche
Yes.
document?
The 20 most profitable online course mega niches, because every course that I've ever seen succeed is in one of these 20 mega niches. And you start mega, the big bucket categories, and then you go micro from there. And then you keep drilling down, drilling down, drilling down until you have something so clear and so specific. So that guide is the first step. And you can get it at liveyourmessage.com/abundant coach. Liveyourmessage.com/abundant coach will get you that guide. It's the first step. And then you just keep drilling down from there. So I would look inside first and kind of go through this process. I would understand, well, all right, where do I want to start? And maybe I choose a completely different mega niche this time to kind of turn something around in 90 days than where I started. And I will say that today you have to really go micro niche to succeed because there's so many more coaches in the market than there used to be. It's become a movement, it's become a thing. And specificity creates universality. A lot of people think that generality is what's going to sweep the biggest possible net and collect the most people and be the most service. But it's actually the more specific that you get, the actual more value that you create because you're actually doubling down on something that, you know, you can get really specific through what you do, through who you serve, and or through how you deliver what you do. So the what, the who, and the how can all get more specific. And so I would probably choose something really hyper specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say definitely download this guide because I remember in the beginning, before I had Marisa's training that I received through Brave Thinking Institute, I would get like all this anxiety about niche and think it was about like 40-year-old acupuncturists who want to, improve their home life. And this is not the approach Marisa is suggesting here. So don't get anxiety, download the guide. It's going to actually help relieve some of the anxiety you have about creating a niche. So make sure you get that, liveyourmessage.com/abundant coach. And Marisa, I want to say, what a pleasure, what a joy. Thank you so much for coming on today and just giving this massive value to us.
100% super fun to have this hour with you. And of course, with you, the broader you here listening on the line. So thank you for the work you do in the world. Thank you for the courage to step up and live your message.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you never miss a new upload. You can help our channel continue to grow as we invest in creating more great content for coaches. Lastly, check the description below for helpful links to the resources mentioned in this video. Thank you and have an amazing day.